what are some things people could do? I mean, there's sometimes things come on people and there really wasn't anything they could do, but there's a number of things people can do. And like, again, like, you know, when I wrote about Bundy, I mean, the thing about Bundy is even when the women knew that, you know, he was out, there was a guy out doing this, when they would meet a guy like Bundy, they, oh, he's so articulate, he's handsome, you know, he's so nice, it can't be somebody like this, and yet it is. So you have to be kind of thinking in a mode and kind of like not trusting people unless you really know them. So there's things that you can do. But the unlocked door, it carries with it some very strange things. I mean, I'm assuming that it's this way like in Europe and things like that, and perhaps in Canada. But the United States has a real problem with it. And now people in high crime areas, they're a lot better at locking their doors because the possibility of violent crime is always there. And, you know, here in Louisville, I mean, there's been so many shootings in the West End that, you know, we have known some people personally that had their children who live in the West End sleeping on the floor because of drive-by shootings. They didn't want them near a window. And I don't think they did that for that long, but when there was a rash of things going on, so that's the kind of fear there. So all these people were locking their doors. But when you get to the better areas, it's, you know, you're just as likely to come upon an unlocked door as you are a locked door. And so, I mean, and here we are, normal people. I couldn't imagine going into anybody's house at night. I would think that the moment I walked in, somebody is either going to tackle me or shoot me or whatever. But these people have absolutely no fear. And that's another thing. People have a tendency to believe that the bad people out there think like they do. There's certain things, of course, they wouldn't do because I wouldn't do them. But that's the wrong way to think. There's a lot of people out there that do a lot of bad things, and they think their thinking is night and day. It's different from us. And there's things they would do, and they have no problem doing it. And so, you know, most people don't think like that. I mean, I talk about in the book that there's a scene, I think I say this in the preface, there's a scene from in the movie Sea of Love with Al Pacino when he's walking with Ellen Barkin, this girl that, you know, he knows, and he's pointing out like various murders of the second story on this building. He worked a homicide in there and over there. And he said something to her. He said, you know, the way we see things and the way you see things, not the same. And that's true because cops are immersed in murder. And anybody, whether you're a cop or a writer or if you're a forensic person or if you're a photographer of stuff, whatever, a newspaper guy, it doesn't matter. If you're immersed in that world, you learn about it. You think differently about it. Well, my intention, people would start thinking differently too because they need to see what can happen. When I wrote the book, The Bundy Murders, and he had kidnapped a girl by the name of Deborah Kent. He tried to kidnap Carol DeRanche from the Fashion Place Mall, but she was able to break away from him. So he went about 20 miles north, and he went to a play where they were having a school play in this high school buried deep within the neighborhood called Viewmont High School, and he was able to get, you know, he introduced him, and not introduced himself, but he came into the theater, and he before the play had started. He was seen by hundreds of people. He didn't mind being seen, and he was able to hang around long enough that when Debbie left to pick up her brother, he followed her out, whacked her on the head, you know, and then he came back inside for a few more minutes, but within no time after that, he left. But the thing of it is, most people would think, well, if you're an abducter, you're certainly not going to go into a theater and go in, you know, the hallway that runs in front of a teeming with people and expose yourself. I mean, you just wouldn't do that if you're an abductor. But actually, that's what he did do. So these people think differently, and we have to remember that. And I don't ever want to be morbid. I don't want people to, brood about things, but I would just like them to become, more aware of the circumstances and that things can happen anywhere. And there was a police chief named Dean O. Anderson, and I write about this guy in my book, The Bundy Murders, and because he was kind of different. At least I'm sure he's a great guy, a great captain, or whatever he was. But he made a statement that was in the paper, and I included it. And he talked about the abduction of Debbie Kent from this neighborhood. And he said, I used to believe that Bountiful was a safe place, but I can't say that anymore. Well, my first thought is that I don't care where you are. There's no place that's 100% safe. You can have an area, and Bountiful, where this girl disappeared, is still a relatively safe place. But what people don't realize is, and what he didn't realize, I mean, he was a cop and he should know, and I say this in the book, that any city, hamlet, wherever, town, parking lot, anywhere that you go, there's a chance for the most horrific danger if someone that we would call a bad person is there. So there's no place that you can go that is 100% safe. And so when you've got, like in Bundy's case, an abductor of women out, running around, and somebody is coming out into a darkened parking lot, well, that's exactly where Bundy liked to work. But the thing of it is that this kind of surprised the chief. Well, it shouldn't have, because any place can have that kind of evil come into that area and do something. So even his thinking was not exactly up to snuff, as it were.
Well, it's funny you bring that up about, evil can take place anywhere, because the city of Versailles in Kentucky didn't expect there to be somebody like Ronald Exantis running around, and that was just in the news recently. So I'll let you talk about that one. That, to me, is probably the most interesting of the 13, for the simple fact that there was nothing there beforehand. There was no history with him.
No, that's one of the strangest cases, and if you know, it's in fact, at the time the book was published, it hadn't even been adjudicated. The trial had not commenced, but I don't know if you know this, but he was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
For the murder,
Yeah, which means, and this is a terrible thing, which means that he'll be carted off to a mental hospital. And check this out. If he is deemed at some point in the future to be not a threat to anybody, he's back out on the street. That's the way this stuff works. And it's the same thing with Todd Ice, and I've written about Todd Ice, who killed 7-year-old Donna Knox years ago here in Kentucky, and he was released one day. Anyway, but this guy it's a strange case, because you got this guy Exantis. He's a nurse. I think he's a diabetic nurse up in Indianapolis. He's known and liked by people. He's been a good nurse. Apparently, he never showed any signs of anything being wrong. And he gets in his car one night, and he travels south, probably comes through Louisville, heads towards Lexington. This guy you talk about something random. He goes beyond Lexington a number of miles, a few miles, 13 miles, something like that from Lexington. He gets in the little town of Versailles, gets on Douglas Avenue, stops at the corner of Douglas and Gray Street, and there's a house there, and this family was renting it, and he gets out of the car. The mother I think she was working at UPS, and she was, gone because she worked third shift. The father was in there, and his two children. Logan I call him Nathan Simpson. I got a story about that because, unfortunately, I was contacted by the parents, but I'll talk about that next. But he goes in and he goes through the unlocked front door. Now, I can't be sure, but I'm sure in my own mind, but I can't really be sure. But I can't dogmatically say he wouldn't have gone in if the door was locked, but I don't believe he'd have broken in. He walked through this unlocked door. He wandered around on the first floor at about 4 a.m. He goes into the kitchen and gets like a butcher knife. He goes upstairs and he goes in to the bedroom where Logan is sleeping. And I think that they were sharing a bedroom. I think he was sharing a bedroom with the sister. But in any event, she heard it. And he started stabbing him in the head and the neck. And she runs to his aid, his little sister, and is injured but not seriously and gets thrown down. The father hears the commotion. And he, attacks the guy and holds him. And I guess the daughter is able to call the police, and within about 3 or 4 minutes, the cops are there extremely quickly. And it turns out that, after he was taken into, custody and people examined him, he was psychotic. They don't know why this happened, but if you can think of how random that is, as far as we know, he'd never been to Versailles. He didn't know these people. And he was able to come in through an unlocked front door. Well, again, this unlocked front door business is a common theme for American households, even to this day. And God knows it shouldn't be, but it is. And I'm sure these folks are locking up now. And I remember there's a police officer I know, and he lives across the street from this fellow. And I didn't contact his family. And he happened to mention to them that I had written about the case. So they contacted me, and they were very upset about it. And they were wanting to stop me from writing about it. And I said, well, it's really not anything more than what has already been reported in the paper. And but I said I can't do that. I am going to report what has happened, but I said, my heart goes out to you folks. Well, they asked me not to use the real names, and I didn't. And they didn't want me to write the story at all, but I wasn't going to do that. So I told them, I said, I don't have to do this, but I will do it. And so I said, I'll change the name. I'll change your old name, but his name is going to be the same. And so if any other names mentioned in there, those will be the real names. So anybody can Google Exantus, who reads the book, and find out, the actual family's name. But I did that as a courtesy. But they were very, very upset, and I can understand it. But it's like I was catching hell for actually writing the thing. And I told them, I said, listen, wait till you just read it, and you'll see that it's really no different than what was reported in the newspaper. But sometimes people get very upset, and I can understand it. But but then you got to do the flip side. People need to also know about what has happened. And I think that's the greater thing there. And but I understand. But anyway, so that's a little side thing. And I don't usually ever like to contact the families. I've talked to families of victims before, and it's never pleasant. And they're all very nice people, but they're very upset. And, I remember when I published in Snitch, they did an article I had submitted. And whenever they did my articles, they were always front page things. They were the main article for the newspaper for that week. But anyway, there was and we may have spoken about this before, but there was the drive-in killers. Those two guys in 1973 on the outskirts of Louisville at the drive-in. They killed one of the ticket takers, and they came back like a week or so later and got the next one and killed them. I remember, and that was eventually published in, it was published in Snitch, but it was published in book form in Unnatural Causes. Uh,